So, today we celebrate 70 years of the accession to the throne of Queen Elizabeth II. This is an incredibly remarkable achievement, and later this year it will result in street parties and nationwide celebrations. This morning, I suppose I want to start with my own recollections of the Queen. Most recently, I have, virtually 9 years ago to this day, I stood just down there and swore my allegiance to the Queen at my licensing as the Vicar of Silsworth. A bit before that, at Durham Cathedral, just before I was ordained priest, I swore my allegiance to the Queen. A year before that, when I was ordained deacon, I swore my allegiance to the Queen. Part of being in her church, of which she is the supreme governor. And of course, I have had the real privilege to meet Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. I was in my 20s. It was a bright sunny day at Windsor Castle. We were out in the quadrangle. She came over. I will never forget the fact that it was a bright sunny day and she had that very, very bright pink outfit on. And so the sun, she glowed in the sun. And I remember having two significant thoughts about Her Majesty. The first was, and I mean this with all due respect, how very small she is and how very short she was. And because I'd never seen her in person before. And then the second, as she walked away and I looked at the castle and I thought about everything she'd done, and over the years now I reflect on, is how very big she is, how very incredible she is, and what she has done. Today, as we gather on this Sunday where we celebrate 70 years of her accession to the throne, I would like to take note of Her Majesty's calling by God, Her Majesty's vocation. Elizabeth was called to serve God. She was called to serve Jesus Christ as monarch of these isles and head of her commonwealth. Her Majesty is not shy in her vocation. She is always ready to talk of her faith. And perhaps for most of us, her Christmas message is where we see this most often. The truth is that any vocation or calling to serve Jesus is not all about words, it is about action. And we see that in Her Majesty. We see her grace, her wisdom, her gentle authority, and her sharing regularly her faith in the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so today I want briefly to take each of our three readings and to think of Her Majesty's vocation and ours. So that first reading we heard was from the Old Testament. We get to be present at the calling of the prophet Isaiah himself. And it's an immensely dramatic scene. It's full of angels and trains and burning coals and earthquakes and fire. But right at the centre of it is God's calling. In this case, God's calling of Isaiah, the prophet. But also, as we reflect on it, yours and mine and Her Majesty's. God says, "Whom shall I send?" And Isaiah says, "Here I am, send me." Isaiah will go on, and he will correct the evildoers. He will encourage the faithful, and will even prophesy the birth of Jesus Christ. It's easy to mistake a prophet as a person of words. Yet Isaiah starts this journey with action, and his words encourage the action and transformation of others. And it starts with those words, "Here I am, send me." Her Majesty answered that very same calling. When it came to her coronation, she was anointed in exactly the same way that we anoint children at baptism. She was anointed exactly the same way that the bishop anoints at confirmation. She was anointed in exactly the same way that clergy are anointed at their ordination. Because she is anointed into a Christian vocation, Christian calling to serve Jesus Christ as Queen. Today we mark 70 years of one who was sent to minister to her people. This is her vocation, but it's also your vocation, and it's mine. It is our calling. Our second reading, I'm going to slip around a bit, and I'm going to go to the Gospel. Our Gospel reading, this is taken in the order they appear in the Bible, rather than the order we read them in our service, is from St. Luke, where the fishermen are called. I find this account hugely interesting for lots of reasons. The first for me is that, I don't know whether you noticed, but they catch the biggest catch of their lives. It's nearly sinking the boat. This has got to be the most incredible occasion for any fisherman. And what does Simon Peter do? He leaves everything he has, including the best catch of his entire career, to follow Jesus. It's also interesting because in the Old Testament, our heroes are mainly shepherds. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, David, Amos. Yet Jesus calls those who fish because they have a particular set of skills. The fisherman goes out to bring in the catch, but as you noted in that reading already, they don't go alone. The shepherd might stand alone for many, many hours looking after the sheep, but Simon Peter, we find, is a partner with James and John. When the boats start to sink, he pulls others across and they help. Fishermen work as a team. Our Old Testament heroes are alone, yet Jesus calls a team. And what better than a team who fish? A team who know how to work together. And Her Majesty answered that very same calling. Her Majesty has always been called to work together. She has worked together with successive prime ministers, many gone, some that might go, archbishops, staff, ladies in waiting, and of course, let's not forget, her beloved late Philip. Her Majesty's vocation was never alone. It was always together, and still is together, despite that haunting picture that you've all got in your mind as I mentioned this, of her at Philip's funeral. Her Majesty speaks of this vocation often, one that she shares with her nation, with her subjects, with you and with me. So that vocation, of course, is both yours and mine as well as Her Majesty's and Simon the fisherman. And then the third passage is that passage we heard from 1 Corinthians. This is where St. Paul writes to the church about calling, about vocation. And Paul talks of his vocation. This is Paul, the one who was Saul of Tarsus, the one who hounded out the followers of Jesus Christ, the one who had blood on his hands, the one who was called with zeal to wipe out this new movement, who then met Jesus Christ on the Damascus Road in an incredible vision, and it transformed his life. And so he talks of his vocation now to proclaim the good news. He preaches Christ crucified and risen again in the words of the Scriptures. That he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures. Paul's words are an example to the church in Corinth. That's why he writes them. He wants to say, this is my calling, and you share this calling with me. This is what I came to tell you. This is what you have believed. This is the hope in which you stand. You are the church of Jesus Christ in Corinth, and it's your job to stand with me and to preach that very same gospel. Her Majesty, like St. Paul, is always ready to proclaim the good news. And so it's only proper and right that I quote Queen Elizabeth herself. She said these words: "For me, the life of Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, is an inspiration, and it is an anchor in my life. He is a role model of reconciliation and forgiveness. He stretched out his hands in love, acceptance and healing. Christ's example has taught me to seek, to respect and value all people, of whatever faith or of none. So where does that leave you and me on the day that we celebrate 70 years of Her Majesty's accession to the throne? Think of her calling, think of her vocation, and look to her example. Look to the dramatic calling of the prophet Isaiah to be sent. The calling by Jesus of those very ordinary fishermen who would bring in the catch together. Or even St. Paul with his characteristic boldness as he proclaims the gospel. Jesus Christ crucified, died and risen for us all. So I want to finish with Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II again. A prayer request. These were the words that she said on her first Christmas broadcast on the 25th of December 1952. Pray for me, that God may give me wisdom and strength, and that I may faithfully serve him and you for all the days of my life. That is a prayer of faith. That is a prayer of vocation in Jesus Christ. So don't let it just be Her Majesty's. Let it be yours. Let it be mine today.